You've spelunked into the Matt Cave. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. It's week 3, come and gone, and things are looking pretty much how I expected. I did think that BYU was going to go 2-1, but they upset SMU, and they're 3-0. Utah, 3-0 as predicted, maybe not as comfortably as some Ute fans would like. And Utah State is 1-2. That was predictable. Could be a very rough year for the Aggies. But we'll be getting into that and more as we go through the episode. First, I want to thank you for being here and to let you know about the socials. On Twitter, that is at the Matt Cave Pod. On Facebook, the Matt Cave Podcast. I also have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Matt's Cave. And lastly, I do have a YouTube channel as well. Search up the Matt Cave Podcast on there. You'll find my channel. Love to interact and chat with you all. So you can come by every weeknight. I stream on both YouTube and Twitch. And that is from 6 p.m. Mountain Time to 8 p.m. Mountain Time. This week it might be a little bit different, just based off of real life stuff. But I will still be there every night. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Like, review, do all that good stuff on wherever you're listening, however you're listening. I would appreciate it. And now that that boring stuff is out of the way, let's get into the goods. All right, so Utah goes up to Logan, Utah, into Maverick Stadium. And, well, they took care of business. Early on, it looked a little bit dicey for the Utes. But, the defense was not playing how they normally play. And that was by design. It wasn't a very good design, but it was by design. Coach Whittingham, after the game, said that because the starting quarterback of the Aggies was Bryson Barnes, the former starting quarterback for Utah last year, they thought they needed to switch things up on the defensive side of the ball because they figured he knew and had seen a lot of it because, well, he played there for 4 years. And so they tried to switch some stuff up, and it didn't work. The Aggies were actually leading a lot of the first half, and it was a little scary. But as the game went along, Whittingham and Morgan Scalley just decided, you know what, let's just go to what makes us us and be good. And they were. The defense in the second half only allowed 7 points. They picked off Bryson Barnes twice. They looked like the world-beating defense that we all have come to expect from a Morgan Scalley-led defense. Top 10 in the country, at least top 25, I think, pretty much every year over the last, decade. So it's pretty good stuff. And the defense finally just went, all right, we're just going to do what we normally do. And you know what? It worked. They overthought in that first little bit. And I was getting texts and messages saying, should we be worried about this? They don't look very good. I said, no, it's not time to panic. If it's late third quarter and it's still super close, then we should panic. But no, this is like they were saying on the telecast. It's a veteran team. They've been there before. There's hardly anything they haven't seen by now over the last 3-4 years. So what they did is they went back to Utah football. Pound the rock, play action pass, let Isaac Wilson kind of just throw the ball. Just tell him, don't be afraid, just throw the ball. And the defense just going, all right, Utah State, you had your fun. It's time to stop. And that's what happened in the second half. Isaac Wilson looks like a true freshman. He does. Like he just graduated high school earlier this year. So he's an 18-year-old kid going in there, leading a team that has national championship aspirations. And by the end of the second quarter and throughout the rest of the game, he started to look comfortable in the offense. It looked like he did not feel like he was... the moment wasn't too big for him. He was in there. He trusted his guys. His guys trusted him. The offensive line started to block like it should. And the running game took off with Mekhi Bernard and Mike Mitchell, who combined for almost 200 yards rushing. Those two guys are legitimately really good running backs, and it's really good to see that from Mekhi Bernard just because of all the injuries this dude has had to go through. For as many injuries as Cam Rising has had, I think he might be out next week because he coughed funny. But with Mekhi Bernard, I always want to say Micah. With Mekhi Bernard, the dude has gone through so much, and it's so nice to see him not only come back from it all, but to be a focal point for this team. As you look at the receivers are actually really good this year. Money Parks, Dorian Singer, they're both really good. My guy, Micah Pittman, that I shouted out earlier in the year, boy, maybe I need to shout somebody else out. it seems like he can't crack the rotation. It looks like Dorian Singer and Money Parks are really the receivers because Utah likes to run multiple tight ends. And obviously we all know about Brant Keithy. Caleb Lohner, you're going to hear this all year, Cougar fans. Former Cougar basketball player, transferred to Baylor, came back, transferred to Utah to see if he could play football. And he doesn't look like a natural. It's not very fluid. But when you do get in that red zone, the power forward is going to do what power forwards do, and that's get up above everybody else and get that rebound. So this team is still legitimate. Cam Rising was suited up. He was the emergency quarterback for Utah in case their 3 quarterbacks got hurt, which, if you're a Utah fan, that's not too wacky and wild to see. And so that's he could have gone if the game were bigger. Sorry, Aggie fans, but it was your Super Bowl by far from what Utah is expecting to do this year. So that's where we're kind of sitting with Utah. All systems go. Green lights. Seems pretty good. Coming up for the Utes, well, it's the meat of the schedule. It's Oklahoma State, Arizona. Those are the next 2 games. The Oklahoma State game is going to dictate how the Big 12 is going to look for the rest of the season. Oklahoma State did struggle against a couple of opponents earlier this year. They did take care of business this week. Really, what it boils down to for Utah is shutting down the running game against the Cowboys, because if you put that quarterback in obvious passing situations like BYU did a couple of times last year, he's not going to be able to pull it through for the Cowboys. So it's a very winnable game for Utah. If Cam Rising is healthy, we saw what the offense was capable of against Baylor and against Southern Utah. I think the Utes should be able to win this one, but it will be a close game. If you have high blood pressure like myself, maybe don't root too hard for this one. Maybe go out for a walk during the game or something. I don't know. But if you're a fan, just deep breaths. Meditate throughout the game. It'll be close, but I think Utah will pull it out. For Utah State, early on looked great. It was high energy. They were flying around the field. Rasul Faison is legitimate. The dude is a really good running back. Bryson Barnes, well, Ute fans, you know, he will throw whatever ball is in the playbook. Whatever the read is, he's going to throw it. Whether it's a good read or not, well, we saw what happened. 2 interceptions, a fumble. He's playing for Utah State, so I could see Utah State potentially making a bowl with that first half performance, but they ran out of gas, and they started running out of gas midway through the second quarter, and you could tell. There were only a couple of guys on Utah State that were 100% high energy throughout the full game. That would be Faison, that was Bryson Barnes, and it was Ike Taylor. And now, as you move through the season, you can kind of build on that first half. This is a potentially top 10 team that will finish the season that they led in the first half. They need to build off of that. I don't know how they'll be able to do that. The crowd was actually very impressive in that first little bit, but once things started to turn sour, the fans started to turn their backs, and it got real quiet really fast. We'll see. With Utah State, this year is a year in flux. Everybody's saying they should be going to the Pac-12 as well, or as Twitter has come to call it, Pac State. Because if you were unaware, this past week, the Pac-12 announced that they poached 4 teams from the Mountain West to join them for next season. Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and Colorado State will be joining Washington State and Oregon State. So if they want to keep this state theme running, they should get Utah State. It would only make sense. It really would. Maybe get New Mexico State as well. But that's where they're at right now. People are saying that Utah State should join based off of the strength of their athletics program. Pump the brakes. When it comes to conference realignment, the heads of these conferences look at a few things. They don't just look at performance on the field. They look at, are you filling up your stadium? Do you have strong television viewership numbers? And is there stability in your athletics department and at the head of your school? This past year has been really rocky for Utah State, and that's kind of made them toxic when it comes to conference realignment. So Utah State leadership has shot themselves in the feet because of everything that's gone on. There's a couple of lawsuits going on against the Utah State administration. There's a lot going on there that Utah State just won't be invited. They won't be. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, kind of, but that's how they're being viewed. All right, so that's it for there. The Utah wins this one 38-21. They remain number 12 in the AP poll. They're number 10 in the coaches poll this week as the huge game against Oklahoma State is on the horizon. And Cam Rising will play. He was held out, like I said last week, for safety. The Utes didn't really need him to beat a team like Utah State. So now they need him. Hopefully he won't get pushed into Gatorade coolers and he won't get his finger caught in the face mask of an opposing player that will cut his finger. All right, because that's what happened. Now let's move on to the BYU game, the late game, going up to Laramie, Wyoming, facing off against a horrible Wyoming Cowboys team. Just terrible. There is no positives for this Wyoming team. Their quarterback throws under 50% completion rate, which, you thought you would expect from Jake Retzlaff, but no, that's Evan Svoboda. He went 14 of 31 against the Cougars with one interception. So even with the interception, the ball still hit the ground more than it hit his receivers, or somebody's, caught it. Well, BYU won the game. They were expected to win the game. They were a 9.5-point favorite going into Laramie. And this is a warning to all of you spelunkers out there. Utah fans, BYU fans, Utah State fans, not fans of any of these schools, just sports fans. Don't look at the box score as your guiding light. Because if you look at the box score for Jake Retzlaff, he had a great game. Here are the stats for you. 22 of 36, 291 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He also led the team in rushing with 6 carries for 62 yards. Objectively, those are fantastic stats. Any team in the country would love those stats. But that's why you listen to people like me, who watched the games, who knows what they're seeing. And what I'm seeing from Jake Retzlaff is not a quarterback that is going to lead BYU to any wins in this Big 12 season, even against teams like Houston or Cincinnati, which they don't play. But this season, as a couple of sports writers wrote in the Salt Lake Tribune and the Deseret News here locally in Utah, BYU is only going to go as far as Jake Retzlaff takes them. And what I'm seeing from Jake Retzlaff is he's going to take him to a 3-win season. He missed really badly 3 wide-open receivers. 1 should have been intercepted on a deep pass that was literally nowhere near a BYU wide receiver. He overthrew twice in the middle of the field, which you never do. You're never supposed to do that. That should have been interception, but there was no Wyoming defender around. So against better competition, he could have thrown 3 to 4 interceptions. We go further with those running plays. Against better competition, he's not getting out of the pocket. And if there is better competition, it would be a better called defense. So there might even be a spy on him, so he can't scramble for 62 yards. Against Kansas State, you're going to see just how bad Jake Retzlaff is. He misses throws that pretty much any other starting quarterback in the country, not named Evan Svoboda, can make. Even Bryson Barnes can make the throws that he's missing. His wide receivers are open. His wide receivers are good enough to catch these balls. From Chase Roberts to Cody Epps, Darius Lassiter to Keelan Marion, these guys can make these catches. JoJo Phillips too, Keanu Hill. All of these guys can make those grabs. You just got to put it somewhere where they can catch it. Oh, and by the way, there was a hospital pass that he threw as well to Keanu Hill. Why are you throwing that ball? There's 2 guys right there. Now, the route design was terrible from offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick. It was terrible because you're always going to have a defender underneath the throw and you're going to have a defender trailing your receiver. And so the guy who's underneath is going to drop back and blow that pass up every time. And your quarterback is not good enough to know that, so he's going to throw that read every time, and your wide receiver is going to wind up in the hospital. So my guy that I called out had a touchdown, Keanu Hill, and now he's injured because of that hospital pass. Jake Retzlaff is not a good quarterback. You do not look at the stats and go, oh, those stats are fantastic. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. He's really not. Against legitimate competition, he has one win, and that's SMU. Wyoming is one of the worst teams in the country this season. He also beat a Division II school, or an FCS school. Sorry, I'm still in the 90s, but an FCS school. Against real competition, last year, he was winless, and he was the reason why BYU didn't win a single game. Didn't win a single one. BYU should have beaten Oklahoma. Why didn't they? 3 egregious turnovers from the quarterback. BYU should have beaten Oklahoma State. Did they? No, because of a couple of interceptions from Jake Retzlaff. That's what we're going to see as we go along this season. He's not a good quarterback. He's not. He's erratic, and he also fancies himself a gunslinger, and he's not. People say he's got a heck of an arm. He doesn't. He has an average arm. He has the average arm of any quarterback at the Division I level. There aren't really many noodle-armed quarterbacks left. There's not Matthew Berry's out there anymore. There's not Riley Nelson's out there anymore who can't throw the ball. So when you look at Jake Retzlaff, you see a below-average quarterback who, for whatever reason, won the competition over Gary Bohannon. Gary Bohannon should be the starter. He should be. And as we go along, you're going to see why. And this quarterback that BYU has right now, Jake Retzlaff, he did say all of the right things in the postgame interview. He said, all credit go to my teammates. Offensive line blocked up and held up well for me. My guys ran routes really well. They held on to balls. They made me look really good. Jake, they did not make you look good. Okay? They made your stat sheet look wonderful. But you missed a lot of stuff. There were a lot of throws that were behind receivers, where if that ball was placed in front of them, those could have been either huge plays or touchdowns. In particular, a couple to Cody Epps and a lot of missed throws to Darius Lassiter. A lot of missed throws. Parker Kingston did drop a pass, but that was really the only drop I saw. Keanu Hill, I think, dropped one as well. But other than that, 2 drops, that's rare for BYU these past few years. And Jake Retzlaff could only manage 291 yards and 3 touchdowns. It should have been a blowout for BYU. It should have been 58-14, maybe even 58-7. Instead, it was 34-14, a lot closer than it looked, because Wyoming is terrible. I cannot stress that enough. Wyoming is not good this year. And BYU, oh boy. Cherish these 3 wins, Cougar fans, because I do not see a route for BYU to get a victory. They're not beating Kansas State, not even close. They're going to get their doors blown off. Baylor, maybe there's an opportunity there, especially if Dave Aranda gets fired, but we'll see what happens as we go through the season there. That's in 2 weeks. Arizona, no. Arizona's too good. Oklahoma State, nope, not happening. Central Florida, in Florida, not happening. Utah, oh boy. Even without Cam Rising, Utah's going to beat BYU. Against Kansas, maybe, because Kansas's best 2 players are very injury-prone, and they did lose to UNLV. But UNLV is a very good team this year. Arizona State and Houston, that's a great way to end the season against the 2 worst teams in the Big 12. The 2 teams that were picked below BYU, by the way. So maybe 5, like I said at the beginning of the season, maybe 5 wins. They could sneak 1 and get 6, but it's 5 wins again. And it's all because of Jake Retzlaff. If they do not make a change at quarterback in the game against Kansas State, that's how the season's going to go. They're going to lose every game in October, and they're also going to lose almost every game, or they're going to lose half their games in November. BYU needs to make a change at quarterback. Jake Retzlaff is not good. 22 of 36 against a team as bad as Wyoming? No. To give you an idea, the quarterback for Arizona State blew out Wyoming 48-7 to start the season. Sam Leavitt of Arizona State went 14-22. Only 8 incompletions and no interceptions. How about we go to another game here? The game against Idaho that Wyoming had. The quarterback for the Vandals of Idaho went 12 of 21 with a touchdown, no interceptions. Yep. I'm sorry, but You're going to hear it all year. Jake Retzlaff should not have been the starting quarterback. I don't understand the loyalty to him. Gary Bohannon is a better athlete. He's more experienced, and he's won a Sugar Bowl. Yeah, he won a Sugar Bowl with Baylor. All right, I could ramble and rant about that all night, until the cows come home, but I'm not going to. One more stat, though, I want to point out about Jake Retzlaff. Since taking over as starter, with 4 games to go last season, Jake Retzlaff has the most fumbles of any quarterback during that time, with 9. He has the most lost fumbles, with 4. And he has 10 total giveaways. That's your starting quarterback, ladies and gentlemen, of the BYU Cougars. And they want to turn themselves back into QBU. That's not happening with Retzlaff. All right, so let's move it along. Oh boy, Real Salt Lake. I told you not to panic a couple of weeks ago. It's time to panic. You gave up 4 goals to Houston. 4 to Houston. I do want to say, though, that Real Salt Lake has a history of tripping up against Houston, of pretty much any team in Texas. Houston, Austin, FC Dallas, doesn't matter. For whatever reason, Real Salt Lake has this mental block against teams in Texas. So that's part of it. The past 2 games against Houston, Real Salt Lake has lost by a combined score of 7-0. That's not very good. Now, one thing I like that Real Salt Lake has done is they're starting to give Gavin Beavers more time in goal. That can only be a positive as we go into the future. And let's remember, this season was not supposed to happen. Real Salt Lake should be at the bottom of the table. They really should be. If not for an unbelievable start from Chicho Arango, who at the time was in the MVP conversation, but since his suspension, and say that 5 times fast, he has been a non-factor. I don't know what happened, but he is not the same player that he was before, so that's kind of where Real Salt Lake is sitting. They also sold their other leading goal scorer for a record fee, which is awesome. Sets them up very well for the future. So this season wasn't supposed to happen. So before we get too angry or down in the dumps, at one point, Real Salt Lake was in the conversation for the Supporters Shield, which goes to the team in MLS that gets the most points. Since that conversation, Inter Miami has really pulled away from the pack, and the LA Galaxy has overtaken both LAFC and Real Salt Lake at the top of the table in the Western Conference. But where are the goals going to be coming from for Real Salt Lake is my question. Obviously, if Chicho Arango can start finding the back of the net again, I think a lot of the problems will be fixed. But the defense has all of a sudden become very leaky when earlier in the season they were pretty darn staunch. They weren't giving up easy goals. Now, I say that with Zach McMath gave up a couple of howlers, it was still a solid defense. Now, Gavin Beavers has been under siege, as has Zach McMath. So there's no more transfers that can happen. There's no trades that you can do. This is the squad that Real Salt Lake has. How is Pablo Mastroeni and crew going to put the pieces together to at least not embarrass themselves when the playoffs come around? I think that's the goal. That's what everyone should be rooting for, is do not get blown out in the playoffs. Whoever the opponent is, whether it's a Texas opponent or somebody else, they have to figure out a way for the sum of the parts to be greater than the whole, or however that saying goes. Because they don't have the superstar. They don't have a Hugo Lloris in goal like LAFC. They don't have Marco Reus. They don't have Luis Suarez or Lionel Messi, all of those guys. They don't have that guy. They have Chicho Arango, but Chicho Arango has become a glacier. He's gone that cold. So as we move forward, it is time to panic a little bit, but keep in mind, this was not supposed to happen, at least not this year. So enjoy the ride. Real Salt Lake is still sitting in 4th, tied on points with Colorado Rapids. They actually are behind them because Colorado has more wins than Real Salt Lake does. So that's why they're sitting in 4th. They're still 2 points clear of 5th place. So it's still realistic that Real Salt Lake could be even a number 2 seed going into the playoffs, depending on how we wrap up the season. All right, so that's that as far as the roundup goes for last week. For video games, I am still ensconced in the warm, loving embrace of MMORPGs. This past week on stream, I played Final Fantasy XIV like I have been. I also picked up some time on World of Warcraft on stream. I've been playing it a lot off stream. So that's what I've been doing. As far as like gaming news is concerned, there's not much out there, really. There's still a lot of, just the petty stuff that gamers always talk about, like, oh, you nerfed my favorite character in this game, I hate you. You nerfed my favorite gun in that game. You made this change and I don't like it, because gamers don't like change, apparently, unless it turns something they like to use into an overpowered mess. So I just kind of want to do one thing here when it comes to gaming. And if you are looking to get into MMORPGs, or you want to get back into them, or you're playing them right now, I just want to say this to you. Play what you want to play. Play what feels fun. Don't give a flying fart about what is the strongest, or what is the optimum rotation, or I need to min-max my stats. How do I do that? Don't. Just don't. The people who care about that stuff, that write these articles on Wowhead or on Icy Veins or on all these different websites, GameSpot, whatever, they are in the top 0.1% of the players of these MMORPGs. They want to be among the world leaders in whatever they're doing. They have 40 hours a week to throw into these games, like it's almost their job. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to the streamers either. Play what is fun. Play what helps you relax. Play what helps you escape from your day-to-day. That's what video games are for. Somewhere along the way, we got lost in, I need to be better than this other person. Not true. Or this game needs to be a masterpiece. Every game that I play needs to be a masterpiece. Again, not true. If you're playing a game that you enjoy, that you find fun, who gives a toot about what score IGN gave it? Or this streamer trashed the game? Who cares? Are you having fun? Yes. And if the answer is yes, keep playing. Who cares? So that's my message to you, Spelunkers, is if you're having fun, whether it's a first-person shooter, or a third-person, or an RPG, or Stardew Valley, whatever it is, if you're having fun playing it, keep playing it no matter what people say. All right, that's the show this week, everybody. Thank you all for being here. As always, rate, review, all that stuff. Follow me on the socials, but most importantly, this week, go out and have some fun, whether it's with a video game or you look up highlights of your favorite team. Just go out and have some fun. Enjoy your week. There's too much negative in the world. Find what makes you smile. Find what helps you relax. And just have some fun. And I'll be back next week when we spelunk back into the Mad Cave.